You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. Thank you to them. I'm Lucas Kaplan, writer for NetsDaily, host of Nets Film Focus, all that stuff. And alongside me for some not quite mini episodes, but shorter episodes, some player reviews, of their seasons, is Sarah Kustok, commentator for Yes Network, all those things. Nets on Yes, college basketball, someone who knows how to evaluate players, that's for sure. And that's what we're doing today. So how are we doing, Sarah?
Fantastic. I'm here talking Brooklyn Nets basketball with you, Lucas. So we're good.
What could be better? I believe this is episode number 27, recording this on a very sunny day outside. The NBA playoffs are on. What a great time of year. You got like an NBA playoffs prediction, finals, hot take,
Oh,
anything?
wow. I didn't realize you were coming hot with this.
I didn't want you to think
Um,
about it before. I didn't want you to prepare.
you know what? I'm rocking with OKC in the West.
Yeah, fair.
I know
Same.
people talk about experience and age and whatnot, but love them, love how they play. And the East, I'm gonna go with my a little bit of my head, but more of my heart. And I'm gonna pick the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm gonna pick that
Yeah,
matchup.
that'd be awesome. That would just be an awesome matchup.
I'd love to see it. We
Love
get a lot of love.
Cleveland.
We get a lot of love for all the connections that we have in Cleveland. So, and
Yeah,
I additionally too, yeah,
that would be
love how
great.
they play.
Yeah, I'm loving it so far. I'm right. I'm covering this insane Denver Clippers series for Swish Theory. If any of you guys want to read my work there, but yeah, that if this is out before that series ends, but it's been fun.
That's why I hope. I was wondering if you're gonna make us look silly if something happens, but I don't think it'll happen by
No,
then.
no, I hope. Hey, who knows? That's the joy. It's fun to be wrong. However, we're certainly not going to be wrong when we talk about these Nets that we're reviewing. And again, I said it last time when we talked about Day'Ron Sharpe and Tyrese Martin. So many individual positives, which is really what you want to see in the first year of a rebuild, a new direction, a new head coach, a lot of young guys in the rotation, a lot of guys in the rotation in general. The Nets played a ton of starting lineups, a ton of guys logged minutes for them this season. I believe the final number was somewhere in the high 20s. Anyway, today, we're just focusing on two. And I gave you the choice last time, but I wanted to start this time with Cam Johnson. I don't think I'll hear any objections. Cam Johnson, we talked about him a lot every week. Now we can kind of focus some of our thoughts. Give me, not a hyper specific takeaway from his season, but something, whether it's super nerdy, just spiritually as a leader, something that stood out to you, a quality, a game, a month that, you're going to reflect on when you think of 2025 Cam Johnson.
I appreciate you giving me the option of spirituality,
Yeah, he
because
was a fun guy.
I do think a broad range takeaway, probably my most poignant takeaway
Hmm.
from watching him throughout the course of the year, was about the spirit that he consistently brought to the group, each and every day, and the leadership that that provided. And I've seen a lot of teams, we talk about the iterations of this Brooklyn Nets season, but I think just iterations of what this organization and what the team has looked like, the roster has looked like since coming to Brooklyn. That's what I've been there since. And I think there have been few players that have come through that have impacted in ways we can talk about his career year in terms of numbers, but
Hmm.
impacted in a way in terms of the level set of expectations of how everyone was showing up on a daily basis. And I think given a ton of credits to coaching staff and Jordy Fernandez, but that also goes hand in hand with leadership and the vets you have on your team. And I think it was critical watching just how he was able to help a lot of the guys. And it was a handful of players that came through, whether it was Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith, but he in particular who saw it throughout, of understanding what it takes to be a true pro, and in that way it's filtering into the rest of the team and the disposition and the personality of the team. And I think that's a huge part of how we were able to watch that. And we could talk a ton about the evolution, if you would call it that. It's parts
Right.
of his
Yeah.
game that he was given more responsibility that he took on, um, But to me, the evaluation of the season was not about wins and losses. It was about a foundation laid. And I think he was such a critical part of what that looks like and what you want to build upon. And I don't think that's easy to come by with a lot of individuals with what's being asked of them throughout the course of what was in many ways a very challenging season.
Yeah, it's there were a lot of all individual positives, but it's not easy, to go 26 and 56 if you're Cam Johnson and you've been to the NBA finals. And it's not easy to constantly be in trade rumors, have a couple ankle sprains, all that. But he was just happy to work as hard as he could and happy to be as available as he could be for everybody on this team. I remember there were, a lot of rumors in November, and they were on a West Coast road trip, and he kind of tweaked his ankle versus Golden State. And, a lot of people, myself included, were like, wow, it's crazy that he's trying to fight through this and play in this game. And the Nets ultimately mount a huge comeback in Golden State and like one of their most fun wins of the season. So when I'm thinking about highlights for Cam Johnson in sort of the less X's and O's sort of way, that really comes to mind. But he was just, I don't know how else to say it. He was just a joy to have on the team this season and really fun to watch. And a huge part of that, obviously, is the X's and O's and like what his statistical production and all that. He really was the main option this year. When you think about whole season, guys who were available, guys got injured or traded, aka Cam Thomas, Dennis Schroeder, stuff like that. He had to carry a huge burden for this Nets offense. How did he pull it off? He had never really done that in his career. How do you think he pulled it off quite nicely?
I think that's what goes the interweaving of everything we spoke about earlier about him being the ultimate pro, about how he showed up every day. I think it was the stuff that he did to prepare himself for seeing every defensive look, the defensive coverages, the double team, the blitz, like you name it. Defenses were keyed in trying to stop him and get the ball out of his hands. And so I think the respect that that shows by opponents and then how he continued to deal and adjust that. And he's a player who, when you think about his game, the end of the season, in particular, you saw this throughout the course, but every
Yeah.
defense keyed in on him, how they were focusing. It's that term that's used that you can actually watch a player, and it seems so cliche, but it felt like the game had entirely slowed down for him, that he had total command. He can get to wherever he wanted to on the floor. His reads of pick and rolls, his communication with his teammates, the shots that he was taking, not taking, how much he was facilitating and creating, like the orchestration of offense for himself, but those around him, and having the pulse of, okay, when do I need to do what? There were so many games that he just to me looked like it was a different level of a player. And I think we had talked in past podcasts this about to me the biggest pivot point in a player taking a leap is consistency, knowing every single night, every single day how they're going to perform and what they're going to show up like. And it felt like even a greater shift of how he was able to read a defense, see a defense possession by possession. And that's the different coverages, the different looks, the different changes in how he was being played. And that to me was just a beautiful thing to see, because I think for understandably a challenging season with the different iterations of the lineup, the rotation, his challenges with some injuries, to watch that and see that at that point, I thought was just a really special jump.
Nets were 6.5 points per 100 better on offense with Cam Johnson on the floor per cleaning the glass, which filters out garbage time. They had an offensive rating of 113, which is about 40th percentile, far above where they were as a whole. And he really, you could see the progression and you could see the game slow down. I know that kind of sounds like a cliche, but I'm glad you said it because I think it's very true. There was a huge, there was a shift where in the beginning of the year, he was awesome. He was making shots. He was coming off curls, a couple dribble handoffs, making every spot up three. And then right after the Nets traded Dennis Schroeder, like right after, I believe their second or first game, I think second, was against the Utah Jazz. Cam Johnson to handle the ball a ton, turn it over 6 times, generally like made some rough decisions, a little overwhelmed by a team that normally drops, really trapping him. That's fine, growing pains. Rest of the season, he turned it over 6 times, just twice more, but was great at reading the floor, getting good shots for himself. He knew he couldn't get all the way to the rim all the time, especially in isolation, so he worked in some comfortable mid-range looks, but he kept firing from three and ended up 39% on high volume as always. He shot nearly a career high, like a smidge under his career high at the rim and from two, self-creating a lot of those attempts. It was just a perfect marriage of career high volume and efficiency. And I'm not really sure how a guy taking such a leap in usage and responsibility could have handled it much better. I don't know what an even better outcome for him, offensively would have looked like. He ends up averaging 19, 4, and 3.5 on 48, 39, 89 shooting splits. A game that stands out to me is the comeback win against Washington in March. They were down 16 in the second quarter.
Man.
And the whole offense to get back in the game was really Cam isolates at three. Cam runs off a screen, hits a three. Cam gets fouled. He went to the line 7 times that game, made all 7. Draws 2, swing for another guy. So that's a game that really, to me, encapsulated his growth. And if any Nets fans want to go back and watch it to see just how good he was this season, that's the game I would recommend. Because it wasn't perfect. He didn't make every shot. He only, quote unquote, only scored 18. But this is our guy on offense, and he can get us back into games. Did you have a favorite moment or story or interaction or game from him?
Um, I don't know if it was one. I think it was just, again, I'll circle back to his understanding of just the way in which he could elevate the level of everyone around him,
Yeah.
and doing so in a way that he was still had a really beautiful balance between when he needed to get his own and
Mm-hmm.
what it took to get wins. And it was a lot of those little things. And I think even too, like it, the value of someone isn't always just when they're on the floor. It comes, like we
Right.
saw when he was still on the bench, and how engaged and active he was in making sure, whether it's supporting your teammates, whether it's communicating with them, whatever that looked like, even when he was injured. It circles back to our original point of leadership, and like that type of leadership, and watching that in him, where being new to the team, whatever it was, 2.5 seasons ago now, and just kind of his growth and development of feeling things out and what his role would be, the responsibility. And this year, it felt like he understood
Yeah.
what was needed out of him in so many different areas, and he embraced that, and
Embraced. Yeah.
he did it in really, again, it's I can't think of it, but a really really beautiful way. And I think, I can't imagine that was easy given all the chatter, all the talk, and
Mm-hmm.
he invested himself in ways, that I think were so valuable for this group, and not just collectively for this organization, but I think you will continue to see it in the ways that it impacts individual players as well, and then what they're able to become.
Simply put, he went above and beyond, I think, what was asked of him this year, and everyone was better off for it. Quick, not really trivia before we move
Oh,
on.
okay.
Not kind of trivia, mini trivia. Do you want to guess how many NBA players this year shot 57% from two, 39 from three, and 89 from the line? Because that's what he did. It's not just him. It's not like a trick question.
Four.
Good guess. Five. Five
Oh, I
players did
figured there
that.
probably wasn't a lot.
No, that was perfect. He matched Sam Hauser, Sam Merrill, and Aaron Nesmith, who did not have the offensive responsibility, good players as they are, that he had. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was the other one, and Shea will likely win MVP.
Yeah.
So that should tell
So
you all you
if
need to
that
know.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Do you want to talk about one other guy I had mentioned, Jalen Wilson? Jalen Wilson, sophomore, who led the team in minutes this year, which will be a fun trivia, I think, fact down the line. What did you make of Jalen Wilson's season?
Total minutes, right?
Total minutes. Sorry, total
Yes,
minutes, not
yes.
minutes per
Not
game.
that, yes.
Good, good catch.
Just I had to double check that one. I was like, wait a second, that can't be. I thought it was I thought it was such a bright spot in a solid year to see the ways in which he continued to grow his game, get more comfortable, and really just go through the rigors of a full NBA season. You mentioned he played in 79 games,
Yep.
had started in 22. Um, but just the ebbs and flows of what things looked like when things were going well, when he was hitting shots, when he had some really, really big, important games. And then also when he was going through stretches where he was still trying to figure things out. And I think
Hmm.
that's what happens. That's the just kind of the inner workings of what things look like in your second year in the league. And I think he handled it just with such calmness and understanding. And again, we keep kind of circling back to the word of like embracing what the role looks like in ways and try to improve it. And I think he's a guy who continued to show that. And you're going to get an opportunity to keep watching and kind of see, okay, what does this look like? Looking at the strengths, the 3-point shooting, yes, but using his size, the rebounding aspect, the 50-50 balls, like all of that type of stuff, I think he continued to put in that type of work.
Definitely. And I think it's important to note for the second year in a row, just like his rookie year, Brooklyn was slightly better with him on the court, not statistically insignificant. 2 points per 100 better with him on the court, just about for the second year in a row. He ends up averaging 10, 3, and 2 on 40, 34, 82 splits, encouraged by the free throw shooting. Ends up shooting 50% from three over the last 2 weeks. Thought he shot confidently. I kind of thought, to be a little nerdy, he moved his shooting pocket a little to the right, little
Oh,
on his right
okay.
shoulder.
Okay.
Um, maybe I'll send you a couple clips. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's always good when you think a guy makes an adjustment and then it leads to more made shots. Maybe it's not just a small sample size thing. The key for Jaylen, I think, is figuring out obviously what's the selling point when the 3-point shot isn't going in.
Yes.
Um, what do you think? He had more takes to the rim that were impressive this year, more drives, a little more variety. What do you think the sell is on a night where he goes 0 of 5 from three?
Which inevitably will happen and will happen
Yeah.
for any shooter. And so I think, one, you would set it just confidently shooting. I think he continued to do that. The drive to the rim is a really important part of drive and closeout, especially for a 3-point shooter. I think he plays well off the ball. And so just some
Hmm.
of those cuts off the
Good
basketball, what
cutter.
that looks like in spacing. I think I don't know if you want to say questions, but just those points of, okay, what does it look like defensively? The rebounding aspect, what did the rebounding numbers look like? Steals numbers, not even just steals, but more of the disruption
Right.
or denial or being in the right spots. The understanding functionally of what the team is trying to do on that end of the floor. I think that's always the value of if you're not making shots, that's fine. That's one thing. You assume it'll happen at some point during the game or whatever. But can you carry your load and carry that weight and make an impact on the other end? And so I think it's just that continued consistency defensively of how that pans out.
He had pretty incredible rebounding numbers his rookie year. They dropped a little this season. I think, answer is probably somewhere in the middle. How far in the middle, will matter. He almost doubled the 3-point volume from 5.5 attempts to 9 per 100 possessions. And he went up almost 2%, about 1.5%. So the trend line's looking up. Played a ton of minutes, 79 games. Jordy was very happy with him, with his effort, all of that stuff under the hood looks good. And it's a guy out, under contract. I'll be excited to watch in year three. Any closing thoughts on either Cam or Jaylen? These couple of wings that were huge for Brooklyn this
No,
season.
I thought similar to what we've been saying. This was despite what the record looked like, I found such pleasure and enjoyment in covering this group and this team. And you could point to these two guys. I think there's a lot of them, but these are two of the players that I would put in that boxing category of just how they showed up, their character, their personalities, the work ethic, all of those things. And I think, those are such important pieces to have in a group, regardless of what kind of season you're having. And I think you can certainly say that about these two guys of just what their attitudes and then their mentalities were on a daily basis.
It's hard to imagine Brooklyn won't be better off for the guys they had in the locker room this season and the vibe this season they had. And it is hard to imagine that you all won't be better off for listening to the Backcourt and learning more about your favorite Brooklyn Nets. Hopefully you learned something this episode and you enjoyed hearing us talk about Cam Johnson or Jalen Wilson. We'll be continuing with these mini episodes of the Backcourt, player reviews, offseason stuff, the draft lottery coming up, draft after that, summer league. Basketball never ends. I'm covering the Liberty too, if you care about that. Basketball never ends.
Yes.
That's the best. That's probably the best part of it. It never ends. At least to me. You got to come out to some Liberty games this season. They're sick.
I promise. Oh, I'll
Okay,
be out
good.
there. I'll be out there.
Defending champs, baby. Although I'm supposed to be an impartial journalist, so pretend I didn't say that.
Seafoam season.
Great color. More teams need to do teal. Nets, if you want to do a little
I
teal
agree.
one year. They had that one. Oh!
I don't know if you can see my nails. This is
For our audio listeners, Sarah has very exactly Liberty.
Yeah,
seafoam
it was
fingernails.
unintentional. I had pink last time. I had purple, so yeah, I was just shaking it off. But there we go.
Maybe subconscious. Maybe the Liberty being so good ingrained the thought of teal
I
into
agree.
your brain.
I agree.
Yeah. Hey, Nets decision makers, if you ever want to do a teal inspired city edition, something uniform, I don't know what goes into that, but that'd be cool. And it'd be cool if you could rate and like and subscribe and do all those fun things for our podcast. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you listening. And I guess, as I said, basketball never stops. So we will see you when we see you.